Surprise! Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, your boy on social media at MMALOTN, and the architect behind the MMA Fight Archive, ensuring that you leave no stone unturned when you're researching and preparing for these upcoming MMA events. You want to know how I'm prepared for this PFL card, or how I've studied up on the Cage Warriors card going down on Saturday, or how other people are preparing for the ACA, Fury FC, A1 Combat, KSW cards that are all coming up as well. They are also using the MMA Fight Archive. This is a database with direct links to past fights for all of the upcoming competitors on these upcoming fights and these cards. We have about 10 promotions that we currently cover, and once the holiday season hits, I'll be putting out a poll and a suggestions post to the members to see what other promotions they would like to see added to the Fight Archive, and that will be I'll be tackling that in the new year as well. We have close to 2,700 fighter profiles on there right now, close to 60 subscribers who are taking full advantage of it. If you want to be one of those subscribers, don't worry, you don't have to shell out any money to begin with. There's a 7-day free trial for you to try it out for free and see what the hoopla is about. Check it out. See why the MMA Fight Archive is one of the best things that top handicappers, top coaches, top predictors, and analysts use to ensure that they are prepared for these upcoming events. Check it out, MMA Fight Archive. Link in the description below. 7-day free trial. Check it out. All right, this week, we are going over PFL 10, which is the championship event, the culmination of the full PFL season, where a boatload of guys are going to be, and women, are going to be haggling and fighting for an opportunity to win the PFL championship, as well as a $1 million prize, which is the granddaddy of them all, if you want to call it, for the PFL promotion. Obviously, they just picked up Bellator last week, so that's a huge accomplishment for them as well. And I can't wait to see what it looks like for them in 2024. But first things first, we got to tackle this championship event and the 12 fights that are currently on it as well. Normally, I do not do PFL breakdowns for the public. Those are strictly for the Patreon folks. But considering there is no UFC event this weekend either, I thought we might as well just parade one of these breakdowns out for you guys, because I know there's going to be a lot of you that are looking for PFL breakdowns with the absence of the UFC, and your boy got you covered. I promise you I got you covered. And I'm going to surprise you with this PFL breakdown. So I hope you guys are appreciative of that. Hit that like and subscribe below if you haven't already. And if you're looking for breakdowns for Cage Warriors, which goes down Saturday afternoon, you can find breakdowns for every single matchup, detailed written breakdowns. Link for that is in the description below for the Lock of the Night Patreon page. And again, don't get it confused with the Fight Archive Patreon page. That's if you like doing your own research. But if you just want to see me and what I am doing and thinking for these upcoming matchups, the Lock of the Night Patreon page is where to do it. All right, I'm not going to go over any of the past UFC recap or anything like that. I'm going to do that on the following week's podcast. This is strictly for the PFL. Again, 12 fights this weekend, and I guess there's nothing else really to plug. I'm just going to get right on into this bad boy. First fight of the night that we got is going to be Jesse Stirn going up against Josh Blyden. Stirn is a guy that originally went 0-2 in the PFL back in 2021, but has picked up a lot of steam and now finds himself on a 4-fight winning streak. One of those wins I actually got to see firsthand cage side when he competed on the Unified MMA card last December. He picked up another win after that as well. The guy's streaking right now. He looks good, and I think he's finally going to come into the PFL now with a more solid skill set, more confidence in his game. The guy's a solid all-around fighter. He has slick striking, good takedown defense, and good offensive wrestling if that's what he requires to get the job done as well. He has great cardio to do it over 15 minutes if that's what he needs, but he's a very solid fighter and will probably make a name for himself in the PFL if he continues to get solid experience and they give him progressive steps up in competition. His opponent this weekend is a 36-year-old veteran of the Georgian MMA scene, and I mean Atlanta, Georgia area, not the country Georgia, but he's a fighter that's not been that active since making his professional debut 10 years ago, or at least close to 10 years ago. I believe it was 2014, but he only has a 9-2 record since that amount of time. The guy has not been that active, and he doesn't really seem to have MMA as a priority in his life, which is a big no-no when you're going up against a guy like Jesse Stirn, who wants nothing more than to make it to the next level in the game. Considering that PFL is likely the standalone number 2 promotion in the world now, we'll probably see the best version of him, and I expect him to stay away from any of the wrestle-heavy approach that we might see from Blyden, or even some of the big power that Blyden showcases. I'm expecting Stirn to utilize his slick boxing approach, but also utilize his grappling to put Blyden into uncomfortable positions and win this fight on the scorecards. Feel pretty damn good about this spot because we got a guy that's, 36 years old, not really taking MMA too seriously, and you got a guy in Jesse Stirn who has his eyes set on the prize and wants to make a name for himself. Give me Stirn, and Stirn by decision. Next up, we got Kai Wu going up against Phil Caracappa. This one's very weird to me because the PFL trotted out Kai Wu several months ago when they initially announced his signing to the promotion, and I never really got the big whoop about the guy. He has a 7-4 record. He's 1-2 over his last 3 fights. Doesn't really seem to have what it takes to break it through to the next level. And the PFL is giving him a very stiff test in his PFL debut this weekend against a guy in Caracappa who has some solid experience under his belt, has some CFFC experience under his belt as well, but also has big wins over, big-time regional guys, or at least guys that have kind of made it to the higher level, and James Gonzalez, who's formerly of Bellator, and Louis Gaudinot, who used to be in the UFC several years back. But Caracappa, very solid wrestler, has a good pace, has good cardio as well. He's able to take his opponents to the ground and grind them out from that top position. Trains out of the Dante Rivera BJJ gym, which is one of the more well-known gyms on the East Coast. His opponent, Kai Wu, more of a striker, a guy that likes to use his fast, snappy jab and his combination striking to put the hurting on his opponent. However, not really impressed with his level of competition, at least the guys that he's been beating as of late. Not very good. The guys he's been losing to are guys that utilize the style that Caracappa is very good at, and that's taking fights to the ground, grinding his opponents out from on top, possibly finding finishes as well, but I think that we'll see him go out there and grind out Wu over 15 minutes and win this fight by decision. I completely understand why Caracappa is a very big favorite in this spot. I have some concerns considering he'll be at a striking disadvantage. His striking is mainly wide winging hooks and just a lot of pot shots, inevitably to shoot that takedown afterwards. But I think that he can dominate enough on the ground to make that chalky price look like a good price tag. If you want to throw him into a parlay, go ahead and do that. But I like Caracappa and him to win by decision. Next up, we got a grudge match here. Last week, we had the Sabatello versus Stotts Bellator grudge match. This week, we've got the PFL grudge match between Bubba Jenkins and Chris Wade. This is a rubber match as these guys have split their first 2 meetings, the first of which was Chris Wade winning by decision. And now, most recently at the beginning of this season, Bubba Jenkins went out there and grinded out Chris Wade, putting him in bad positions and keeping him on the ground, doing a great job of keeping him grounded and doing good enough damage from on top to win that decision victory. Both guys have kind of fumbled the bag this season, as obviously Bubba Jenkins went out there and lost to Jesus Pinedo in the second round of his last matchup, and then Chris Wade obviously losing to Bubba Jenkins and then losing to Gabriel Alves Braga. So both guys now find themselves going up against each other. But the big thing to note here, the wins just wrapped up about an hour or so ago, and Wade missed weight by 3 pounds, or 2 pounds if you want to talk about the 1 pound weight allowance. One thing he's been reiterating all week is the fact that he does not like cutting down to 145 pounds. He's 36 years old, and it's obviously a very hard cut for him. So he's talked about either moving up to 155 pounds after this matchup or just flat out retiring. And once you hear that R word, a lot of people see it as a red flag. I don't like to read too much into it, but it comes down to stylistic matchups that they have ahead of them. And in this specific matchup, you got 2 grapplers that are going against each other, but it seems like Jenkins made the appropriate adjustments between the first and second fight to potentially be effective in the third fight as well, but throw in Wade missing his weight, possibly being at a cardio and durability disadvantage at this point in time. I wasn't so privy on Bubba Jenkins around that minus 175, minus 180 line, but I saw him around minus 150 on FanDuel earlier today, and I had to hop on that for a little bit just to take advantage of that line. I think he should be closer to maybe 60 to 65%, so you're getting just around that minus 150 range. I like that spot here for Jenkins. He seems to be a little bit more invested into the game and trying to make up for the losses that he took, or the loss that he took earlier this season to Pinedo, and I think he still has more left in the tank compared to Chris Wade, who he seems weathered at this point in time, and I feel like he might be the one that will be dealing with some cardio issues later on in this matchup. So expect Jenkins to go out there, replicate what he did earlier this season, putting Chris Wade in bad spots, keeping him on the ground, and just doing a good job in terms of grounding him and doing damage from on top and winning this fight by decision. All right, moving on to the next matchup, we have an amateur fight here between Biagio Ali Walsh going up against Joel Galarza Lopez. It's not often that you see, or actually ever, that you see a major MMA promotion allowing amateur fights on their cards. The only other fight that I can remember is possibly Maria, what's her name? Maria Henderson, Ben Henderson's wife. She had a couple amateur fights for Bellator, but that's also because Ben Henderson was closely involved with Bellator, obviously fighting for their title a couple times as well. So I think that they just wanted to do a favor for him, allow Maria Henderson to fight amateur. But PFL has obviously some ties to Biagio Ali Walsh. Obviously, there's the big rub that he's a nephew of Muhammad Ali, so there's a big storyline that they can push with there. But also the fact that he trains out of Extreme Couture, which is owned by Ray Sefo, who is one of the top executives over at PFL. So it makes complete sense as to why they're giving him this slot, or at least they've given him this slot continuously over the last year and a half. This is another opportunity for him to go out there and continue to build on his undefeated MMA record. Or sorry, he did lose one of his first amateur bout, if I'm not mistaken, but since then has looked squeaky clean. He's very fast with his striking, has some good striking combinations, and that's usually how he puts his opponents away. There is usually a huge skill gap and physicality gap between the way that he lands against his opponents compared to the way that they land against him. And I think that's going to be on display once again here as he takes on a 3-0 amateur prospect, a guy that hasn't been that active though. He had his first amateur fight back in 2019, took off 2 years, had his next 2 amateur fights in 2022, and now it's going to be a full year since he has competed. And he's stepping in against a very active Biagio Ali Walsh, a very streaking and hot prospect in Ali Walsh, and I expect Walsh to go out there and get a finish just as he has in all of his previous victories. I'm expecting it to happen in the first round, but not so intrigued to take the under 1.5 at chalky odds, as it kind of burnt me last time. You kind of forget that in these amateur fights, they're only 3-minute rounds. So 4.5 minutes swings by very quickly. And if Ali Walsh wants to make the jump to the pro ranks very soon, he's going to want to get some more cage time and, get the canvas under his feet and make sure that he's fully comfortable before he decides to get it to the pro ranks and try to continue, an undefeated streak and put together an undefeated professional record. So there could be an opportunity for him to go out there and just be like, you know what, I'm just going to touch this guy out from distance, maybe mix in some grappling, get my feet wet in that aspect of MMA. So I'd rather stay away from the under 1.5 in this matchup. I think he wins regardless. You know what I mean? Like, considering all the ties that I said he has to the promotion when I started this breakdown, there's no way that they're going to put him in a situation where he's going to go out there and lose. And I think they've scouted this Lopez guy enough for him to go out there and just completely squash this guy if that's what he chooses to do. So yeah, give me Ali Walsh by knockout. All right, first championship bout that we have of the evening. And this will actually be the prelim headliner because the rest of the card is going to be pay-per-view, $49.99. Obviously, there's been a lot of stories about that going on throughout the weeks that it was announced. But this is a great one. This is probably the one that I'm looking forward to most. And the odds being at pretty much a pick-em here makes you believe that this will be a very close fight. But this is actually a rematch of a fight that took place at PFL 1 this week, or this season. Gabriel Alves Braga came in as a minus 150 favorite last time around, and he went out there and defeated Pinedo by split decision. Pinedo obviously now has 2 big wins under his belt, pulling off major upsets over Brendan Loughnane, and then most recently against Bubba Jenkins, setting him up for this final spot against Braga. And I'm sure Pinedo wants nothing more than to go out there and avenge this loss to Braga and come home with the championship belt. This is a very intriguing fight, right? Pinedo, a berserker, essentially, likes to move forward, throw wide-winging hooks, put big power on his opponents. I picked against him last 2 fights. I really thought the technical advantages of Loughnane would allow him to win this fight, but Pinedo wanted or showed no respect for the calf-kicking game of Loughnane and moved forward, put big punches on him, and then eventually landed that big knee that started the ending of the fight. And then in the Bubba Jenkins fight, I was surprised at Pinedo's takedown defense as he was able to keep that fight upright and then eventually put Bubba Jenkins into panic mode, put the pressure on him with the punches, and eventually get him out of there. So very impressive work from Pinedo to set up this championship $1 million opportunity for himself. But the issue that he's going to run into with Braga, which he did in the first fight as well, is the fact that Braga does not mind exchanging in the pocket against Pinedo, and Braga is the better technical striker. We saw it in the first matchup where Braga was the one landing those snappy jab down the pipe, the 1-2 down the pipe, mixing up his combinations, whereas Pinedo was still landing on Braga, but his shots were getting a little bit or taking a little bit longer to reach the target than when Braga was, pretty much butchering him from distance. Now, Braga showed a little bit more damage on his face, and I think that's more so have to do with the aesthetics of both of these fighters. Pinedo, very hard to cut, very hard to make it look like he's taking damage, but you just have to go out there and stick to the game plan. I think Braga is a guy that can go out there and exchange in the pocket with Pinedo. I know the difference between this matchup and the last matchup is the fact that there's 2 full rounds that they still have to go out, and that gives Pinedo an opportunity to have more opportunities, to potentially find the finisher against Braga, but I still believe Braga's clean approach is the side to be leaning with here. Of course, this is MMA. Anything can happen, and a brawler type fighter could possibly have more success here than he could have in boxing, but I think that Braga has a better overall game. That means he should be able to land the better strikes, just as he showcased in the first fight, but he can lean on some grappling advantages that he has. He might not be able to land the takedowns, but he can stifle Pinedo up against the cage for a little bit, catch his breath, get back out into distance, and get back to work with his handiwork. Also, add in the fact that I really think that Braga has the overall better skill set. His durability looks on point. Haven't seen him overly hurt. I think that he deserved the unanimous decision that night. I thought it was clear that he won that fight 2-1, at least 2-1. This is a great fight. You're getting pick 'em odds in a fight where a lot of people might be leaning the Pinedo side now because of the success that he had in his last 2 fights. But we know that the betting public loves when guys are looking dominant, getting finishes, and then they like to bet him in their following fights. And I think that's the case that we're seeing here. I think Braga is technically the better fighter, but his wins haven't been as spectacular as Pinedo's outside of the knockout victory that he had over Marlon Moraes. But I think that Braga is still the better fighter here. So give me Braga at near even odds. I even got him at -105 earlier today. Very happy to take that shot. It's going to be a close fight. Pinedo will make this a very difficult fight. Don't get me wrong. But I think that Braga is the cleaner fighter, and he'll likely end up getting his hand raised by decision. All right, first fight of the pay-per-view portion of this card. We got Ray Cooper III welcoming Derek Brunson to the PFL ranks. Now, this is an intriguing matchup because this is taking place at middleweight. Ray Cooper III has made his name in the welterweight division, and he's been on the show for over a year and I'd say 4 months. I think it was 16 months that he's been inside the cage. And it's kind of sad because he actually missed weight, although by only 0.8 pounds, but it's unfortunate when you miss weight going up a weight class. Maybe that's just a sign of the fact that he hasn't really been training, nor has he been taking it seriously. He's only 30 years old, but the fact that he has 34 fights to his name already, maybe the miles are starting to catch up to him. He's normally a slugger that likes to go out there and put guys on their back foot and put his big punches on them, but he also has a bit of a wrestling game that he can take his opponents to the ground and grind them out from that position as well. But I was not that impressed with his performance against Carlos Leal, although we should give some props to Leal as he is a very solid fighter and was probably a scorecard away from actually being in the finals instead of Sada Busi. But Cooper still could be in his prime in terms of his age. Let's see how he actually looks against a very legitimate fighter in Derek Brunson. Now, Brunson will soon be 40 years old, and it was very weird how he got released from the UFC, as he was originally scheduled to fight Roman Dolidze last week, but I believe a month back, he ended up getting released from the promotion, and based on his interview with Ariel Helwani earlier this week, or I believe it was a month ago as well, or 3 weeks ago, He stated that it was a mutual agreement between him and the promotion to pull out of the fight and then eventually release him. He's talking about he hasn't really been motivated to fight in the UFC. He's previously talked about retirement as well. So there's a lot of bit of murkiness going out there in terms of why he was actually let go from the UFC and why he now finds himself in the PFL. Regardless, he looks in tremendous condition, and I think with this new Bellator merger, I think there might be some reinvigorated motivation for Brunson to go out there and probably put on some good performances. The big thing in this matchup for me is the size and height difference in this fight. It's going to be massive. You got a 6-inch height advantage, I believe, for Derek Brunson, and then you have a 7-inch reach advantage. Sorry, it's just, 7-inch reach advantage and a 6-inch height advantage for Brunson. This is a matchup that will particularly be taking place in the grappling realm, considering that's what Brunson likes to do. Especially if he wants to stay away from the big power of Cooper, he can put Cooper in bad positions, keeping him on the mat and utilizing his size to keep Cooper down there. I think that could allow him to posture up and rain down some big shots that he could potentially get an early finish, or he might be able to grind this fight out, dictate the pace, and take it the full 15 minutes. We've seen Brunson in his last two fights slow down in the second round and get finished by both Jared Cannonier and Dricus du Plessis. But I think when he's able to dictate the pace of the fights, land his takedowns, and kind of take his time from that top position, as he did against guys like Kevin Holland and Edmund Shabazian, he should be able to go a full 50 minutes if that's what's required. Cooper will be very live to possibly find a finish in the third round if Brunson is exerting more energy than I expect him to. But at plus 130 or even plus 150, if you can still get that line on Brunson, I think he's a damn good underdog spot to take here. Again, the big red flags on the Cooper side is the extended layoff, the fact that he's missed weight at this weight class, and then lastly, the size difference that we're going to see between these two fighters. I think it's going to be too much for Cooper to overcome, and I expect Brunson to be successful with his wrestling heavy approach en route to his first PFL victory, and I think it eventually comes by decision. All right. Speaking of another fighter that has yet to fight in 2023, we have the return of former multiple-time PFL champion Kayla Harrison as she goes up against Aspen Ladd. But this is not the same old Kayla Harrison, as this is the first time she's coming into a professional MMA fight by having a loss in her last fight. Last time around, she obviously lost to Larissa Pacheco in the finals of the 2022 season of PFL, and that was a fight. It was very hard fought, very close back and forth fight, but it seemed like Pacheco made the reads, made the adjustments that she was unable to make in the first two meetings between the women, and she was able to make the improvements and eventually overcome the monster that was Kayla Harrison. But I think Harrison has a great matchup ahead of her this weekend in Aspen Ladd, a fighter that will likely play into her judoka style, allowing Harrison to get this fight to the ground, utilize her strength, utilize her power, and put Ladd into bad positions and grind this fight out. Again, Ladd hasn't looked the greatest since leaving the UFC. She's 2-1 with the PFL. She lost that one fight to Elena Kolesnik, where she just was unable to get in on the takedowns. She got into it in the third round, but it was too little too late for her at that point in time. But she just fights the same way she always does. She moves forward, very slow, very plodding, has a very robotic striking style. And then when she goes for takedowns, she's very muscly. She uses a lot of strength. And I think that plays right into Harrison's game in terms of utilizing the momentum, switching her hips, landing a trip, landing a throw, whatever it is, getting Ladd on the ground, and then from there she should be able to utilize her strength to keep Ladd in a bad position. Minus 700 is always a very tricky number to play, especially in women's MMA, and you never know what kind of mentality Harrison's going to be coming in with. I'm thinking she's coming out very pissed off. She wants to come in and actually go out there and dominate and reclaim herself at the top of the division. This would be a good starting point for her to do so. I'm not so sure about the minus 700. I might look to just play the decision prop, as I think Ladd will be difficult to put away. So I'm going to go Harrison, and Harrison by decision. All right, next up, we got another championship fight here, now in the light heavyweight division between Impa Kasanganay and Josh Silveira. Starting off on the Kasanganay side, it's crazy that this guy used to fight at welterweight in the UFC, moved up to middleweight, and then now moved up to light heavyweight and has looked damn good doing so. He's primarily a striker that likes to utilize grappling if he sees that's an option or a path to victory for himself. He's a very clean striker, utilizing combinations and his distance, long-range weapons to hurt his opponents and then swarm them with big shots if he sees that he's hurt them. On the flip side for Josh Silveira, you're talking about a guy that has lived and breathed MMA since the day that he was born. His father, Conan Silveira, used to fight in the UFC way back in the day, but is also the head coach or one of the head coaches over there at American Top Team. Josh Silveira also has a wrestling background that he used to have from his ASU days, and he implements in his MMA approach nowadays. He likes to take his opponents to the ground, grind them out from that top position, eventually finding finishers or grinding them out over 15 minutes. He took his first professional loss in the playoffs last year by losing to his former teammate, ATT teammate, Omari Akhmedov. Akhmedov was just too experienced for him at the time and was able to put him into bad positions and take full advantage of that. Silveira is making solid improvements. He's finished all three of his opponents this season in the first round and looked pretty damn good while doing so. However, I think he's going to struggle with the veteran striking approach that Kasanganay has. And as long as Kasanganay can compete in the early going with the grappling heavy approach of Silveira, he should be able to pull away in deep waters, landing the more effective blows in the striking realm and possibly finding a finish down the stretch. I like Kasanganay here, and I think he wins this fight by TKO in the third or fourth round. All right, we got the welterweight championship up next here between former champion Magomedkerimov going up against the most recent champion Sadabusi. Now, we were kind of robbed of this fight last year, especially considering that Magomedkerimov was pretty much forced out of the tournament after he had visa issues getting into be able to have his first regular season matchup. If you guys remember, that was the height of the Russia versus Ukraine war, and a lot of the Russians were pretty much left out of the tournament because the PFL decided to have one of the regular season tournaments in England. So I believe Denis Goltsov and Magomedkerimov were one of the few guys that were left out and pretty much had to pay the price by not making it to the finals and not being able to have the opportunity to get enough points to even make it to the playoffs. Sadabusi took full advantage of that. He went out there, beat all of his opponents, made it to the finals, fought Delano Taylor, I believe who he fought, and outpointed him over 25 minutes and won that fight by decision. Now, C has to go through the toughest opponent that the PFL can put across for him. You're talking about a guy in Magomedkerimov, since joining the PFL in 2018, has a 15-1 record. His only loss came to Ray Cooper in a fight that he was pretty much winning until he got caught in the third or fourth round and got finished in that matchup. But he is a very solid fighter, a guy that likes to utilize his striking a little bit, but does his best work when he's able to get opponents to the ground. I think C's big improvements that he's seen, which allowed him to get that championship victory last time, was the fact that his takedown defense has improved as well. However, you saw earlier this year when he fought Carlos Leal that when Leal actually got him to the ground, C didn't really have many options to get back to his feet. He did eventually pull off a reversal at one point, but it took him a long time to muster that reversal up, and you got to wonder what it's going to look like against a guy like Magomedkerimov, who does a very good job in terms of keeping his opponents on the mat. So it might be harder for Magomedkerimov to get this fight to the ground originally, or at least initially in the first or second round, but as this fight starts wearing on and that pressure of Magomedkerimov starts to weigh on C, I think we'll see Magomedkerimov start to land those takedowns easier and easier. And I think he grinds this fight out, wins this fight on the scorecards, and I think he makes it look pretty dominant as well. I think Magomedkerimov is probably the best fighter that the PFL currently has, at least at this division. And I think a guy like C, who has solid confidence, especially with his undefeated record over his last two seasons, he will give Magomedkerimov a stiff test. But I think that the wrestling is going to end up being too much for C here. So give me Magomedkerimov by decision. All right, moving over to the women's side of things here as they fight for another championship title. Larissa Pacheco looking to get back-to-back championships under her belt. She takes on Marina Mokhnatkina. We'll start off on the Pacheco side, who has continued her dominance from 2022 as she's 3-0 this season, and she has defeated two of those three opponents in less than 50 seconds, most recently knocking out Elena Kolesnik in 14 seconds. We know what Pacheco is great at, and that's with her ability to push the pressure, stay in her opponent's face, and utilize her big striking combinations to put her opponents down and put them out. She's starting to look like a prime Chris Cyborg, especially when she lets her striking go, and especially with how much power she lands with and how her opponents are reacting to them. Her takedown defense, cardio, and precision striking has really led to her confidence and success in recent years, and I expect it to look even better for her, especially considering that she's still only 29 years old. Her opponent, Mokhnatkina, this weekend, she's pulled off a couple wins. I think her most notable victory as of late was that first loss that she handed to Evelyn Martins, where she was able to put together a better body of work and win that fight on the scorecards. Mokhnatkina has some solid wrestling, good top pressure, a decent striking game, but a fighter that I've kind of been low on throughout her career because she had a decision loss, a 25-minute decision loss to Liana Jojua. If people remember Liana Jojua, former UFC fighter, I think her only victory was an armbar victory over Diana Belbita, a position that Belbita unfortunately put herself into. But Jojua was never that good, especially a fighter that would look to win fights on the scorecards. But it seems like Mokhnatkina has definitely gotten better since that matchup, and it's obviously showing in her PFL career. I think that she's going to struggle with the strength and the power striking of Larissa Pacheco here. And even though Mokhnatkina might be able to land some takedowns early on in this matchup, the 25-minute angle of this fight likely gives the advantage to Pacheco, who should be able to keep this fight upright for the most part of it, and that will maximize her opportunities to potentially find the knockout and the finish of Mokhnatkina here. So give me Pacheco to go back-to-back with championship victories here and win this fight inside the distance. All right, moving over to the heavyweight championship finale. We got Denis Goltsov going up against Renan Ferreira. We'll start off on the Ferreira side, who has very much benefited from the fact that his first loss this season came to Rizvan Kuniev, who ended up losing or having that fight flip to a no contest due to a positive drug test. After that, we saw Ferreira go out there and absolutely starch Matthias Scheffel. Great win for him there. And then there was another victory that I picked up, which is kind of escaping me at the moment right now, but that's what Ferreira is good at. He's good at putting his big power punches together and getting his opponents out of there early. Something that he struggled with a lot in the past is being taken down and controlling from that top position by his opponents, and that's where I think he's in for some trouble here against Denis Goltsov, who in my opinion is the best PFL fighter that has yet to win a championship. And I think this is the season that he finally gets it done. He's obviously a minus 250 favorite in this matchup, and he'll have a shit kicking to worry about early on. But I think he's a perfectly intelligent fighter to avoid that early power from Ferreira, maybe tying him up against the cage, wearing on the gas tank, maybe striking with him a little, but making it hard for Ferreira to get to the distance, and then eventually dragging this fight to the ground where he can do his best work. I think Goltsov is a hellacious fighter to deal with, especially when he gets that top position. Just ask Jordan Heidemann from his last matchup. He's able to get the crucifix position, land some big elbows from on top, or even get that full mount, get that Donkey Kong ground and pound going to open up a submission opportunity, or even just a straight up TKO victory for himself. But I think that Ferreira will be tough to deal with for the first 3 minutes. After Goltsov weathers that storm, I expect him to take over and eventually get a finish probably in the second or third round. I'd be surprised if this fight reaches the third round. I'm going to call it second round TKO for Denis Goltsov. And that brings us to our main event, which takes place in the lightweight division. We got Clay Collard looking for his first PFL title, whereas Olivier Aubin-Mercier is looking to go back-to-back, just like Larissa Pacheco, and earn another PFL championship and $1 million prize. We'll start off on the Clay Collard side, who went out there and put on a solid performance against Shane Burgos in his first PFL fight. I believe it was his first PFL fight. That was his last PFL fight playoff spot. But he showcased the better, slicker striking combinations, showcasing good head work, taking advantage of the poor striking defense of Shane Burgos, winning that fight on the scorecards. Earlier in the season, he defeated Stevie Ray, and then he beat that Japanese fighter who's escaping my mind right now at this time. But Collard looking damn good doing so. His opponent this weekend, Olivier Aubin-Mercier, continues his wrecking streak since being cut from the UFC. He is undefeated since being let go from the UFC. He's won pretty much every single fight. I think he missed the playoffs one time because of a lack of points, but he's been looking good ever since, obviously winning last season's championship and now pretty much en route to winning this one. I think what makes him so special is the fact that he is one of the smartest fighters that we have inside the cage, or at least inside the PFL. He's a guy that studies his opponents, comes up with a great game plan, and goes out there and executes it to a T. His first regular season matchup this season was against PFL's new signing, Shane Burgos, and he went out there and outstruck him, had some good grappling success against him, but the majority of his success coming in the striking realm, defeating the striker and winning the fight by decision. He's such a solid fighter, very good everywhere. Good striker, educated striker, but I think he does his best work when he's able to take guys to the ground with educated takedown entries, getting them to the ground, keeping them on the ground, doing big work from on top, eventually getting to dominant positions and looking to get them out of there. And I think that's going to be key for him here against the slick boxer and Clay Collard. Collard is no slouch on the ground, don't get me wrong. He's not a complete pushover, but that's where Aubin-Mercier has the biggest gap in advantage in this matchup. I think Collard will make it difficult early, but as this fight starts going into deeper waters, I think Aubin-Mercier is, I don't know where that break came from. I apologize. But I think Aubin-Mercier's overall better game here is going to be too much for Collard to deal with. Collard is not a crazy one-shot knockout type of guy, and Aubin-Mercier historically has great durability. So even if Collard lands a couple good shots here, I think Aubin-Mercier will respond correctly, whether it's with a takedown, getting out of the pocket, or even countering with some effective shots of his own. But I like Aubin-Mercier here to put together a far better body of work for him to go out there and win this fight on this. Actually, you know what? I'm actually going to take him inside the distance. I think in the fourth, maybe fifth round, he can get Collard into a bad position on the mat, which will open up a submission opportunity for Aubin-Mercier that he will snatch up and get the tap, get the win, and take home another $1 million prize. Give me Olivier Aubin-Mercier to win this matchup and become the PFL lightweight champion once again. There you guys go. Breakdowns on all 12 fights for this final PFL card for the year. Actually, there is PFL Europe in December, but regular season flagship PFL card. This is the last one of the year. Reminder, there is also a Cage Warriors card on Saturday afternoon. If you're looking for breakdowns for that, you guys can check it out with the link in the description below. I have all breakdowns for all 14 matchups that are currently scheduled for that card. I'll be starting work on that right now, and that should be posted well in advance of the card so that you guys can get your place in and check it out. Also, if you have made it to this part of the podcast, check out the Lock of the Night Patreon page where I'll have a free parlay for PFL for you guys. I know that's one thing you guys always like to see is just give me a couple guys I can throw into a parlay. Well, I got a 3-leg parlay for you guys. If you just go to the Lock of the Night Patreon page, again, link in the description below. You don't have to sign up for anything, but it's just giving you guys a little bit of a free taste of what you could be getting. If you do end up signing up to it, I'll give you a free parlay for the PFL card. Hopefully it ends up cashing, so it gives you that incentive to sign up. But that's the whole point of it. Check it out. Link in the description below. That's it for me. Appreciate you guys. Love you guys. Good luck this weekend. And I'll see you guys again next week for the last stretch of UFC cards for 2023. Peace.